Anderson Cooper 360, weeknights at 8 and 10 on CNN.
Will, what was it that initially drew you to this story?
I knew I wanted to find somebody from the era of segregation before the civil rights bills had been passed in this country and who worked in the White House. And so I started this massive nationwide search, made a lot of phone calls, utilized all my sources, and on the 57th call to his father's house, I said, this is Will Haygood, writer with the Washington Post, and I'm looking for Mr. Eugene Allen, who used to work at the White House. Someone had told me that he had worked for 3 presidents, and when I said, I'm looking for Mr. Allen, who used to work for 3 presidents, he said, well, you're speaking to him, but let me correct you. I worked for 8 presidents.
Nobody had ever told his story.
When we were looking at his archives in his basement, he had, I think, really realized the importance of what he had went through in life. 34 years at the White House, never missing a day of work, through 8 presidents, from Harry Truman to Ronald Reagan. I said, nobody has ever written a lengthy story about you, Mr. Allen. And he took a step closer to me and he said, if you think I'm worthy, you'll be the first.
Wow. The film is coming out at this time where, you know, the nation is talking about race in the wake of the Trayvon Martin case. And,
yes, of course.
And do you hope the story of your father contributes to the discussion in a way?
I know, not only hope that it'll contribute, but I pray that it'll contribute to the discussion.
What do you hope it contributes?
I'm hoping it'll generate people into thinking that what we went through in the 50s and the 60s, and even before that, but especially during the modern civil rights era, it is not ended.
One of the things that fascinates me about Mr. Allen's life is that he was in the White House and heard the echoes and the ramifications of the murder of Emmett Till, the murder of Medgar Evers, the murders of the 4 young girls in the Birmingham 16th Street Church, the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was there for an astonishing sweep of history, and you know, all those emotions had to swirl inside of him. His son was serving in Vietnam. I mean, Mr. Allen...
And yet his job was to be there and yet to not be there, in a sense, you know? I mean,
yes. Yeah, I mean, just think about it. In the 50s, he was an employee at the most powerful address in the world. But he would go back to his native Virginia, Scottsville, Virginia, and would have to use a segregated bathroom.
Your mom passed away the day before the election, 2008, and yet your dad went out and voted.
Oh yeah, he was going to vote. Man. He was going to vote, and you know, my mom was, you know, she had arthritis very bad, and I was supposed to get her an absentee ballot, which of course I didn't do, and you know, I apologized to her. I think it was that Saturday or that Saturday, and you know, I said, well, you know, Mom, I'm sorry I didn't get the ballot for you, and she said, that's okay. She said, I'm going to walk on Tuesday. And she walked up the stairs, and she didn't come down anymore. And, you know, that would be in the morning of the 3rd. And so Dad, you know, he had to go up there, you know, he had to vote alone. But it was still unrealistic up until the point where we were at the inauguration. We got invited to the inauguration.
Yeah, what was that? I mean, what was that moment like for your dad?
Like,
I mean,
like something out of the Bible.
Really?
It was like something out of what are those biblical stories? The greatest story ever told.
Yeah. I remember when we got out of the subway and started walking, it was bitterly cold, of course, as everybody knows. I said, Mr. Allen, I apologize. I think we should turn back. I can tell you're in pain. And he looked at me and he said, you hold one arm. And he looked at his son and he said, Charles, you hold the other arm. And he said, because I'm not turning back. When we were sitting down watching the president-elect, first African-American president in the history of the nation, take the oath of office, he leaned over to me and he said, when I was in the White House, you couldn't even dream that you could dream of a moment like this. 2 dreams. I mean, you couldn't even dream that you could dream the dream. And he was crying.
Yeah, I looked at my dad, and he looked at me and said, "Dad, it's really going to happen. This is really going to happen." Well, I got to see it, so thank goodness.